Back to Uvalde, Texas right now, where, if it is possible, the news has gotten worse. Multiple reports now that it is not 14, but 18 children and 3 adults dead in a school shooting at Robb Elementary that began this afternoon. Live pictures of the scene, small town, 16,000 people, now potentially 21 people dead. We knew of 14 kids and 1 teacher, now reports 18 children and 3 adults, possibly a number of law enforcement agents wounded in the shootout with the 18-year-old gunman who is believed to have acted alone. John Lannarelli, former FBI special agent, with us now. John, I said before the break, and as we watch some of the video of the shootout with the suspect, of all the things we don't know, we are positive that in the next few days, perhaps even hours, we will hear some incredible stories of heroics about law enforcement and about teachers who all ran to the sound of gunfire to try to protect these kids.
That's right. We spent over a year in this country vilifying police in many ways, and yet they're running towards the sound of gunfire to try to keep people safe. Likewise, the teachers, who it's not their job to step in front of gunfire, but yet they're trying to keep the children safe as well. There's a lot of heroes in this country who don't get the kind of attention they deserve on a regular basis.
What do you make of the sequence of events, at least as we understand it? Primarily that you have this moment of active shooter inside the school, local law enforcement heads there, and at one point the Border Patrol tactical team, which is a local group of Border Patrol agents that are specially trained, showed up and entered the school. We understand potentially at least 2 of them shot in the shootout. What does it tell you about that distance of time between reports of gunfire and a tactical team going in?
There's a saying in law enforcement that when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. And that's why, despite the great job law enforcement did of putting themselves at risk and jumping into the fray, in this country, sadly, we need to know how to protect ourselves and our loved ones. We need to make sure that we're trained in active shooter prevention and response. Schools are taking that seriously, but I'd like to see more effort in making sure that everybody in this country is properly trained so that when law enforcement arrives, they can do their job and everyone else is safe in the meantime.
Yeah, you have really, it's so hard in those moments when gunfire goes off to react in that way. This is what the vice president said a little earlier. Enough is enough. As a nation, we have the courage to take action and understand the nexus between makes for reasonable and sensible public policy to ensure something like this never happens again. We hear it after every shooting. At some level, when you're dealing with people who are so deeply mentally disturbed as you would have to be to walk into a school and shoot and kill 14 or 18 children. Is there any kind of public policy that can stop true evil?
We talk about gun control every time something like this has happened, but in my career as both an FBI agent and a police officer, I didn't meet anyone who is mentally unbalanced who paid any attention to what the laws are. It's not to say there may be guidelines and rules we need to have in place and look at existing laws, but we're not having a conversation about mental health either and what we can do. We saw just last week in Buffalo with mental health issues and how this permeates in our society. I don't think we're a safer place than we were years ago when we had access to mental health hospitals. That's a conversation politicians don't want to have because it's complicated and expensive, but it's one we need to have.
So often, those difficult and expensive and nuanced conversations are the ones we're not willing to have that could prevent situations like this. Take me through the moments that we know are going to happen, which is the parents showing up at this civic center. There are hundreds of parents who will be reunited with their children, having experienced just horrific pain and anguish and fear. And then there are those who have not. And I'm also thinking about the law enforcement, the police, the SWAT teams, the FBI agents, everybody else who, as parents, go through and can't help but feeling these emotions. If God can't stop evil, law enforcement can't either. How do they deal and process this?
I think all of us who are parents are thinking about just bury that today after this terrible, terrible tragedy. Whether or not your child was injured in the shooting, God forbid, one of the people that were killed, everybody there is a victim. Everybody's going to have to process this emotionally, and some of this is going to be lifelong scars. And the ones who survive to have those scars, sadly, are the lucky ones in all this, as opposed to the tragedy of the children that were lost and the parents that have to live with that. All around, it's going to take time, it's going to take counseling, it's going to take resources. Leland, we're at the end of the school year. This should have been a time of celebration and excitement, getting ready for the summer. Now, those experiences have been marred forever. And in future years, you know that's going to come back to the thoughts of the children and the parents that were involved today.
Yeah, I just keep going back to all the things we don't know, what happened inside that school that may have saved a lot of lives, what may or may not have went wrong, the red flags, all these things. And then you think about these parents of 14 or 18 children who had summer plans, who knew what they were going to do to celebrate the last day of school on Thursday, who knew what they were going to do for Memorial Day. You almost can't think about it. We talked to Colby Hall earlier about how much easier it is to have the political debate, because as humans, we almost can't have the emotional connection to this and make it through. Just in the past couple of minutes, President Biden touched down on the South Lawn just now, and this is now official from the Texas Department of Public Safety. 18 students died, were shot and killed in the school in Uvalde, making it the worst school shooting since Sandy Hook in 2012, which is a sad and awful moment 10 years later. John, President Biden walked in a noticeably slow gait to his walk, according to the reporters who met him on the South Lawn, and told reporters he'd make public remarks later, 8:15 Eastern in the Roosevelt Room, 45 minutes from now, although he did not take any questions. John, right now we understand from people at the scene there that there is no search anymore for an accomplice or anything like this. They believe the gunman acted alone, the gunman's dead. Take us through the next 24, 48 hours from a law enforcement standpoint.
So law enforcement would have a high level of confidence to make that announcement that this individual acted alone.
Tell me what would they need to this early be able to make that determination?
Law enforcement may have had contact with this individual in advance and been aware of some issues. They certainly will have talked to anyone who knew this person, any immediate family members, etc., to get a concept of what's going on at the scene. Over the longer haul, what's going to happen is, right now, I guarantee the FBI is in the process of getting search warrants to be able to seize all the computers in the household and examine any communications this person had been engaging in, not only to make sure that he hasn't been in contact with somebody else, but also to look at what was he doing? Was he telegraphing things on social media? Was he doing internet searches on how to carry out these type of events? All that information will be important. Although the suspect is deceased in this case, you want to look at how you can prevent such future actions and what pieces may or may not have been missed.
We go back to that. How do we prevent these things? And still, I think about the first school shooting I ever knew about, which is where this really seared into all of our memories, was Columbine, and the lessons learned, and we keep getting better at it. But is there a common thread other than mental illness through all of these things that exist?
Many times the common thread is not only the mental illness, but the warning signs that were ignored. The fact that people actually communicated things. Last week, we saw the shooter had communicated messages to other people and on social media saying what he was about to do, yet no one took the time to contact law enforcement. The important thing to remember here is, if you believe something's amiss, that there's a potential threat, picking up the phone and calling law enforcement is not going to get somebody arrested. If it turns out to be nothing, nothing's going to happen.
I'm thinking about Parkland and other cases where people did call law enforcement and then it got missed and the dots didn't get connected. And is that a failure of law enforcement, or is that the simple fact of the matter that law enforcement gets a zillion calls about people who say things and put crazy stuff on social media and then don't go do this? And least we turn into a 1984-like society where law enforcement visits everybody who says something that somebody doesn't like, that we can't prevent these.
Well, in Leland, the sad reality is there's only so much law enforcement resources. You're right. There's a lot of complaints made to law enforcement, but the ones that aren't made is what I'm concerned about. And even when it's made, it doesn't mean there's enough to actually take a person off the street. The hope is by talking to the person, you might trigger them to think twice and not think about it. In the Parkland case you mentioned, that person had been talked to numerous occasions. Law enforcement had been out there, but nothing had changed. There may have been other things that could have been done to prevent it as well. This is a problem not for law enforcement to solve. Law enforcement, as shows up when this all comes together, schools, parents, family, and friends, they know about this long before the cops arrive on the scene. People have to work together to address these issues.
Yeah, we always end up doing so many interviews afterwards where people say, oh, well, he was, everybody thought that this was going to happen. And then it does in some really awful cases. Hey, John, we appreciate you being with us. Thank you. And it goes without saying our thanks to those who were watching on the screen right now who ran to the sound of gunfire. And as you point out, well, their scars will last for a while. The flag at half staff above the... Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.